Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she walked through the busy downtown street. The summer heat was unbearable, and her old shoes were starting to hurt her feet. She had been walking for 3 hours, going from one restaurant to another, hoping someone would give her a job. Her small apartment rent was due in 5 days, and she only had $12 left in her wallet. Sarah was 23 years old and had moved to the city 6 months ago with big dreams. She wanted to become a chef and open her own restaurant someday. But life in the big city was much harder than she had imagined. Her savings had run out quickly, and finding a good job was proving to be nearly impossible. Every restaurant she visited either wasn't hiring or wanted someone with more experience. As she walked past the busy Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant, she noticed how many customers were going in and out. The smell of fried chicken made her stomach growl loudly. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days, surviving only on crackers and water. Sarah stopped for a moment and looked at the help wanted sign in the window. She had already applied there twice before, but maybe today would be different. The restaurant was packed with people. Families were enjoying their meals. Children were laughing. And the staff was running around trying to keep up with all the orders. Sarah took a deep breath and walked inside. The cool air conditioning felt amazing after being in the hot sun for so long. She approached the counter where a tired-looking manager was helping customers. "Excuse me," Sarah said politely when there was a brief break in the line. "I'm here about the job opening. I know I've applied before, but I was wondering if you might have something available now." The manager, whose name tag read Mike, looked at her with exhaustion in his eyes. "Look, miss, I remember you. You seem nice, but we really need someone with experience. This place gets crazy busy, especially during lunch and dinner rush. We can't afford to train someone who might not work out." Sarah's heart sank, but she didn't give up. "Please, sir. I'm a hard worker. I'll do any job you have available. I can clean, take orders, work in the kitchen, anything. I really need this opportunity." Mike was about to respond when suddenly there was a loud crash from the kitchen area. One of the workers had dropped a large tray of food, and everyone in the restaurant turned to look. The worker, a young man named David, looked embarrassed and started picking up the mess. Some customers began complaining about the delay in their orders. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Mike said to Sarah, pointing toward the kitchen. "We can't have any more accidents like this. I'm sorry, but I can't help you today." Sarah nodded sadly and started to leave. As she walked toward the door, she heard Mike calling out to the kitchen staff, his voice filled with stress and frustration. The restaurant was clearly understaffed, and everyone was working under pressure. She understood why he couldn't hire someone without experience, but it still hurt. Just as Sarah reached the door, she heard someone calling her name. She turned around and saw an elderly woman sitting at a corner table. The woman was well-dressed and had kind eyes behind her glasses. Sarah didn't recognize her but walked over anyway. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Sarah asked politely. The woman smiled warmly. "No, dear, but I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with the manager." "I'm Margaret Thompson, but most people call me Mrs. T. I've been coming to this restaurant for years, and I've seen many young people like you looking for work." Sarah sat down across from Mrs. Thompson, grateful for any friendly conversation. "I've been trying to find a job for weeks now. I moved here to pursue my dream of becoming a chef, but it's been much harder than I expected." Mrs. Thompson nodded understandingly. "Dreams are important, dear, but sometimes the path to achieving them isn't what we expect. Tell me, what makes you want to be a chef?" Sarah's eyes lit up as she began to share her passion. "I love cooking. Ever since I was little, I would help my grandmother in the kitchen. She taught me that food isn't just about nutrition. It's about bringing people together, creating memories, and showing love. When I cook for people, I feel like I'm making their day a little brighter." "That's beautiful," Mrs. Thompson said. "You know, I can tell a lot about a person by talking to them. You have something special, a genuine care for others that can't be taught." As they talked, Sarah noticed that Mrs. Thompson had barely touched her food. When she asked about it, the older woman explained that she had been feeling lonely lately. Her husband had passed away 2 years ago, and her children lived far away. She came to the restaurant not because she was particularly hungry, but because it was one of the few places where she could be around other people. Sarah felt a connection with Mrs. Thompson. Despite their age difference and different life situations, they both understood what it felt like to be alone in a big city. They talked for over an hour about life, dreams, and the challenges of starting over. When Mrs. Thompson finally got up to leave, she squeezed Sarah's hand gently. Don't give up on your dreams, dear. Sometimes opportunities come from the most unexpected places. Keep being kind and working hard, and something good will happen for you. Sarah watched as Mrs. Thompson left the restaurant. Their conversation had lifted her spirits, but she still faced the same problems. She had no job, very little money, and nowhere else to turn. As she sat there wondering what to do next, she noticed the restaurant was getting busy again as the evening dinner rush began. The staff was clearly struggling to keep up with all the orders. Several customers were complaining about slow service, and Mike looked more stressed than ever. Sarah watched as the workers ran back and forth, trying their best but obviously overwhelmed by the number of customers. Without really thinking about it, Sarah stood up and walked back toward the counter. She wasn't sure what she was going to say or do, but something inside her told her not to leave just yet. As she approached the counter, she could see that Mike was dealing with an angry customer who was upset about a wrong order. Little did Sarah know that in just a few minutes, something would happen that would change everything, not just for her but for everyone in that restaurant. The dinner rush was in full swing, and the Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant had become a chaotic scene. Orders were backing up, customers were getting impatient, and the staff was running around trying to keep everything under control. Sarah stood near the counter, watching the organized chaos unfold before her eyes. Mike, the manager, was juggling multiple tasks at once. He was taking orders, directing kitchen staff, and trying to calm down frustrated customers. Sweat was beading on his forehead, and his usually neat uniform was wrinkled from the stress of the busy evening. The restaurant had 3 workers call in sick that day, leaving them severely short-staffed. "Where's order number 47? Shouted an angry customer. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes. "Sir, we're doing our best," Mike replied, his voice strained. "We're a little short-handed today, but your order should be ready in just a few more minutes." Sarah could see the exhaustion in Mike's eyes. Despite turning her down for a job earlier, she felt bad for him. The restaurant was clearly struggling, and she knew from experience how stressful it could be when everything seemed to be falling apart at once. In the kitchen, David, the young worker who had dropped the tray earlier, was frantically trying to prepare orders. His hands were shaking slightly from nerves, and Sarah could tell he was worried about making another mistake. The pressure was getting to everyone, and the quality of service was starting to suffer. Just then, Sarah heard a commotion from the kitchen area. A new employee, someone she hadn't seen before, was carrying a large bucket of cleaning solution. The bucket was clearly too heavy for him, and he was struggling to maintain his balance while navigating through the busy kitchen. "Watch out!" David called out, but it was too late. The new employee lost his grip on the bucket. Time seemed to slow down as Sarah watched the heavy bucket fly through the air. It sailed over the kitchen counter, past the cash register area, and headed straight toward the dining room where customers were eating their meals. Sarah's reflexes kicked in immediately. Without thinking about her own safety, she lunged forward just as the bucket was about to hit a table where a young mother was sitting with her 2 small children. The bucket, full of soapy water and cleaning chemicals, struck Sarah squarely in the shoulder and chest, soaking her completely. The impact knocked Sarah backward, and she fell hard onto the restaurant floor. The bucket clattered loudly as it hit the ground, and cleaning solution splashed everywhere. The entire restaurant fell silent for a moment, with everyone staring at the scene in shock. "Oh my God," the young mother exclaimed, jumping up from her table. "Are you okay? That bucket could have hit my children." Sarah slowly sat up, feeling dazed and sore. Her clothes were completely soaked with the cleaning solution, which had a strong chemical smell that made her eyes water. Her shoulder ached from where the bucket had hit her, and she could feel a bruise forming already. Mike rushed over immediately, his face pale with concern. "Miss, are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance?" "I'm so sorry this happened." "I'm okay," Sarah said quietly, though she was clearly shaken. She tried to stand up, but her legs felt wobbly from the impact and the shock of what had just happened. The young mother knelt down beside Sarah, her eyes filled with gratitude and concern. "You saved my children from getting hurt. That bucket was heading right for them. You could have been seriously injured." Other customers had gathered around to see if Sarah was okay. An elderly man offered her his napkins to help dry off, while a teenage girl brought over some paper towels from the counter. Even though Sarah was the one who got hurt, everyone was treating her like a hero. "Let me call my husband to come pick us up," the young mother said to her children. "We need to make sure this nice lady gets to a hospital to be checked out." "No, really, I'm fine," Sarah insisted. though her voice was still shaky. "I just need to sit for a minute." Mike was frantically apologizing and asking what he could do to help. He was clearly worried about the liability issues and what his corporate bosses would say about the accident. The new employee who had dropped the bucket looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor from embarrassment. As Sarah sat there catching her breath, she noticed that Mrs. Thompson had returned to the restaurant. The elderly woman must have forgotten something and come back just in time to witness the accident. Mrs. Thompson approached with a worried expression on her face. "Sarah, dear, what happened? I saw you on the floor and came running over." "She saved my babies," the young mother explained to Mrs. Thompson. "That bucket was flying straight toward them and she jumped in front of it. She's a hero." Mrs. Thompson's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Sarah's soaked and disheveled appearance. "Oh, you brave girl. Are you hurt badly?" Mike was still hovering nearby, unsure of what to do. The restaurant was still full of customers, but everyone seemed more interested in what was happening with Sarah than in their food. Some people were taking pictures with their phones, while others were calling friends to tell them about the incident they had just witnessed. "I need to file an incident report," Mike said, more to himself than to anyone else. "And I should probably call my district manager. This is definitely going to require some paperwork." Sarah finally managed to stand up with help from Mrs. Thompson and the young mother. Her clothes were still dripping with cleaning solution, and the smell was getting stronger. She realized she probably needed to change clothes and maybe get checked out by a doctor just to be safe. "Mike," Sarah said, looking at the stressed manager, "don't worry about this. Accidents happen. Your employee didn't mean for this to occur." Mike looked surprised by Sarah's understanding attitude. Most people would be angry and threatening to sue after something like this. Instead, Sarah was more concerned about making sure the new employee didn't get in trouble. The young mother grabbed Sarah's hand. "I don't even know your name, but I want you to know that what you did was incredible. You put yourself in danger to protect my children. I'll never forget this." As the immediate shock of the accident began to wear off, Sarah realized that something important had just happened. She had acted on instinct to help others without thinking about herself, and now, everyone in the restaurant was looking at her with respect and admiration. Little did she know that this moment would lead to something even more incredible than anyone could have imagined. Word spread quickly through the restaurant about what Sarah had done. Customers who had witnessed the incident were talking excitedly among themselves, sharing the story with others who had missed it. Some people were calling their friends and family members to tell them about the young woman who had risked her own safety to protect two small children from a flying bucket. "Did you see how fast she moved?" one customer said to another. "She didn't even hesitate. Most people would have just watched it happen." Mike was still dealing with the aftermath of the accident, but he couldn't stop looking at Sarah with amazement. In all his years of managing restaurants, he had never seen a customer put themselves in harm's way to protect others. Most people would have sued the restaurant immediately after getting hurt like that. Mrs. Thompson had taken charge of helping Sarah clean up. She had found some extra napkins and was helping to dab the cleaning solution off Sarah's clothes, while making sure she wasn't experiencing any serious pain or injury. "Dear, I think you should see a doctor," Mrs. Thompson said with concern. "That bucket hit you pretty hard, and this cleaning solution could irritate your skin." Sarah was about to respond when she noticed someone approaching their group. It was a tall man in an expensive suit, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and a confident demeanor. He had been sitting quietly in a corner booth during the entire incident, observing everything that had happened. "Excuse me," the man said politely. "I'm Robert Coleman. I couldn't help but witness what just occurred here, and I wanted to personally thank you for what you did." Sarah looked confused. "Thank me? I just reacted without thinking. Anyone would have done the same thing." Robert smiled and shook his head. "Actually, no. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. In fact, I've been watching this restaurant for the past hour, and I've seen how differently people react under pressure." Mike suddenly looked nervous when he heard Robert's name. "Mr. Coleman?" "The Robert Coleman. What are you doing here?" "You know him?" Sarah asked Mike. "He's one of the regional executives for the entire Kentucky Fried Chicken chain," Mike whispered. "He oversees dozens of restaurants in this area." Robert Coleman nodded at Mike and then turned his attention back to Sarah. "I was here tonight conducting an unannounced evaluation of this location. I like to visit restaurants without warning to see how they really operate when they don't know corporate is watching." Sarah's eyes widened. She had jumped in front of that bucket while a high-level corporate executive was watching the entire scene unfold. She suddenly felt embarrassed about her appearance and the fact that she was still dripping with cleaning solution. "What I witnessed tonight," Robert continued, "was something extraordinary. Not only did you show incredible bravery and selflessness, but you did it without any expectation of recognition or reward. That's the kind of character we desperately need in our organization." The young mother who had been sitting with her children approached the group. "Mr. Coleman, I don't know who you are, but this young woman is a hero. That bucket would have seriously hurt my children if she hadn't jumped in front of it." Robert nodded respectfully at the mother. "I saw everything, ma'am. Your children are very lucky that someone like Sarah was here tonight." Mike was standing nearby, still looking nervous about having a corporate executive witness such a chaotic evening at his restaurant. He was probably worried about how the accident would reflect on his management abilities. "Mike," Robert said, turning to the manager, "I need to speak with you about tonight's events. But first I want to talk more with Sarah." Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention. "I really should get cleaned up and maybe go home. I'm still wet from the cleaning solution and I probably smell terrible." "Before you go anywhere," Robert said, "I have a proposition for you. Mike mentioned earlier that you had applied for a job here. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "I've been looking for work for weeks now. I want to become a chef someday, and I thought working in a restaurant would be good experience." Robert smiled. "Well, I think I might have something better than just a regular restaurant job. Are you familiar with our corporate training programs?" Sarah shook her head. She had never heard of any special training programs. She had only been thinking about basic entry-level positions like cleaning tables or taking orders. "We have a management development program," Robert explained, "for people who show exceptional character and leadership potential. It's usually reserved for people with college degrees and restaurant experience, but I believe in making exceptions for truly special individuals." Mike looked shocked. Management development programs were highly competitive and usually required extensive qualifications. He had been trying to get into one of those programs himself for over 2 years. Mrs. Thompson squeezed Sarah's hand excitedly. "This sounds like a wonderful opportunity, dear." "The program," Robert continued, "provides full-time employment with benefits, comprehensive training in all aspects of restaurant management, and a clear path toward running your own location. Participants learn everything from food preparation and kitchen management to customer service and business operations." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Just a few hours ago, she had been desperately asking for any job, no matter how small. Now, a corporate executive was offering her a chance at a management career. "But sir," Sarah said hesitantly, "I don't have a college degree or restaurant experience. Are you sure I'm qualified for something like that?" Robert's expression became serious. "Sarah, qualifications on paper are important, but character is something that can't be taught. What you did tonight showed me that you have the kind of integrity and selflessness that we need in our leaders. You put others before yourself without hesitation. That's exactly the kind of person we want representing our company." The other customers who had been listening to the conversation began applauding. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes, moved by the unexpected turn of events. The young mother was smiling broadly, happy to see that Sarah's heroic actions were being rewarded. "I don't know what to say," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "This morning I was worried about paying my rent, and now you're offering me a career opportunity I never dreamed was possible." "Say yes," Mrs. Thompson whispered with a grin. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Think about it tonight. The program starts in 2 weeks, and I'd like you to be our newest participant. Call me tomorrow if you're interested." As Sarah looked at the business card in her shaking hands, she realized that getting hit by that bucket might have been the luckiest accident of her life. But she had no idea that the most incredible part of this story was still to come. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sore shoulder and the biggest smile she had worn in months. She looked at Robert Coleman's business card sitting on her small kitchen table and still couldn't believe everything that had happened the night before. The events felt like a dream, but the ache in her shoulder reminded her that it had all been very real. She had stayed up late thinking about the management training program offer. It seemed too good to be true, and Sarah had learned to be cautious about opportunities that appeared perfect. She decided to call her grandmother back home before making any decisions. Mia, her grandmother said when Sarah told her the story. Sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be. You didn't jump in front of that bucket thinking about getting a job. You did it because your heart told you to protect those children. That's how I know this opportunity is meant for you. Feeling more confident after talking to her grandmother, Sarah called the number on Robert's business card. He answered on the second ring and seemed genuinely pleased to hear from her. "Sarah, I was hoping you would call. Have you had time to think about my offer?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "I would be honored to accept the position in your management training program." "Excellent," Robert said enthusiastically. "I'd like you to come to our regional office this afternoon to fill out some paperwork and meet the team. Can you be here at 2 o'clock? Sarah agreed and spent the rest of the morning preparing for what felt like the most important meeting of her life. She put on her best outfit, which wasn't saying much given her limited wardrobe, but she made sure she looked as professional as possible. The regional office was located in a modern building downtown, much nicer than any place Sarah had ever worked before. When she arrived, the receptionist was expecting her and immediately called Robert to let him know she had arrived. "Sarah, welcome," Robert said as he greeted her in the lobby. "I want you to meet some people who will be working with you during your training." He led her through a series of offices and conference rooms, introducing her to various managers and trainers. Everyone seemed friendly and welcoming, but Sarah noticed they all looked a bit surprised when Robert explained how they had met. "So you're the young woman who jumped in front of the bucket?" asked Linda Peterson, the head of training development. "That story has been spreading through our entire corporate network today. Everyone is talking about it." Sarah felt embarrassed by all the attention. "I really didn't do anything special. I just reacted without thinking." "That's exactly what made it special," Linda replied. "In a crisis situation, your first instinct was to protect others. That tells us everything we need to know about your character." As they toured the facility, Robert explained more details about the training program. Sarah would spend the first month learning basic restaurant operations at several different locations. Then she would move on to advanced training in management techniques, customer service excellence, and business operations. The entire program lasted 6 months and ended with participants managing their own restaurant location. "The salary during training is $45,000 per year," Robert mentioned casually, "with full health benefits and a performance bonus structure." Sarah nearly stopped walking when she heard the salary amount. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning, especially for someone without a college degree. Her current financial struggles would be completely solved, and she would actually be able to save money for the first time in her adult life. After completing the paperwork and meeting everyone, Robert walked Sarah back to the lobby. "There's one more thing I wanted to discuss with you," he said. "The incident last night has attracted some attention from our corporate headquarters. They're interested in featuring your story in our company newsletter and possibly our national advertising campaign." "Advertising campaign?" Sarah asked, confused. "Our marketing team believes your story perfectly represents the values we want to promote as a company," Robert explained. "The idea of putting others first, acting with courage, and going above and beyond what's expected. They think it would resonate with customers and employees alike." Sarah wasn't sure how she felt about being in advertisements. She had never considered herself particularly photogenic or comfortable in front of cameras. What would that involve exactly? "Nothing too elaborate," Robert assured her. "Maybe some photos for the newsletter and possibly a short video interview about your experience. It would be completely voluntary, of course, but there would be additional compensation for participating." As Sarah rode the bus home that afternoon, her head was spinning with all the new developments in her life. Just 24 hours ago, she had been a struggling job seeker with $12 to her name. Now she had a career opportunity, financial security, and people wanting to feature her story in advertising campaigns. When she arrived at her apartment building, she found Mrs. Thompson waiting for her on the front steps. "I hope you don't mind me coming by," Mrs. Thompson said with a smile. "I wanted to see how your meeting went today." Sarah was surprised but pleased to see the kind elderly woman. "How did you know where I live?" "I may have asked Mike for your address," Mrs. Thompson admitted with a slight blush. "I know it's a bit forward of me, but I've been thinking about you all day. I wanted to make sure everything worked out." "Well," Sarah invited Mrs. Thompson up to her small apartment and made tea while she shared all the details about her meeting at the corporate office. Mrs. Thompson listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and celebrating each piece of good news. "I'm so proud of you," "Dear," Mrs. Thompson said when Sarah finished her story. "You deserve all of this success and more." "I still can't believe it's real," Sarah admitted. "Sometimes I think I'm going to wake up and discover it was all a dream." Mrs. Thompson reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought you a little gift to celebrate your new beginning." Sarah opened the package to find a beautiful silver locket with an engraved message. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it." "This belonged to my mother," Mrs. Thompson explained. "She always said that the most important moments in life happen when we choose to help others, even when it's difficult or scary. I want you to have it as a reminder of your courage last night." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she looked at the beautiful locket. She had never owned anything so precious, and the thoughtfulness behind the gift touched her deeply. "Mrs. Thompson, I can't accept something this valuable." "Of course you can, dear. You've given me something much more valuable than any piece of jewelry." "What's that?" Mrs. Thompson smiled warmly. "You've given me hope. Watching you last night reminded me that there are still good people in this world who care about others more than themselves. That's a gift I'll treasure forever." As the two women sat together in Sarah's modest apartment, neither of them realized that the most incredible part of this story was still unfolding. By tomorrow, Sarah's act of heroism would reach far beyond the walls of that Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant, touching lives in ways she never could have imagined. 3 days after the bucket incident, Sarah's life had already begun to change in ways she never expected. She had started her orientation at the corporate office and was learning about restaurant management systems, customer service protocols, and food safety regulations. Every morning felt like Christmas morning because she was finally doing work that felt meaningful and aligned with her dreams. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah received a phone call that would change everything even more dramatically. The caller identified herself as Jennifer Martinez from the local Channel 7 news station. "Ms. Martinez," Jennifer said, "we received a tip about an incident that happened at a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant earlier this week. We understand you may have saved some children from getting hurt. Would you be willing to speak with us about what happened?" Sarah was confused about how the news station had learned about the story. "I don't understand. How did you find out about this?" "The mother of the children you helped called our newsroom," Jennifer explained. "She felt that your story needed to be shared with more people. Acts of heroism like yours deserve recognition." Sarah remembered the young mother from that night, but she hadn't expected her to contact the media. The whole thing felt overwhelming, and Sarah wasn't sure she wanted to be on television. "I really don't think what I did was that special," Sarah said hesitantly. "I just reacted without thinking." "That's exactly what makes it special," Jennifer replied. "In today's world, we hear so many negative stories. People need to see examples of ordinary individuals doing extraordinary things. Would you consider doing a brief interview with us?" After thinking about it for a few minutes, Sarah agreed to meet with the news crew the following day at the restaurant where the incident had occurred. She thought it might be nice to highlight the restaurant and maybe help their business, especially after the difficult evening they had experienced. When Sarah arrived at the Kentucky Fried Chicken the next afternoon, she was surprised to see how much preparation the news crew had done. They had professional cameras, lighting equipment, and microphones set up throughout the restaurant. Mike, the manager, looked both excited and nervous about having a television crew in his establishment. "Sarah," Mike called out when he saw her, "I can't believe we're going to be on the news. This is amazing publicity for our restaurant." The young mother, whose name Sarah learned was Rebecca, had also come to participate in the interview. She brought her 2 children, Emma and Jake, who were excited to meet the woman who had protected them. "Thank you for saving us," 6-year-old Emma said shyly, offering Sarah a drawing she had made of the incident. The picture showed Sarah jumping in front of a big bucket, while 2 stick figures stood safely behind her. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she looked at the innocent drawing. Seeing the incident through a child's perspective made her realize the true impact of what had happened that night. Jennifer Martinez, the news reporter, was a professional woman in her 30s who immediately made Sarah feel comfortable. She explained that the story would be part of their weekly Local Heroes segment, which highlighted community members who made a positive difference in others' lives. "Let's start with you telling us what happened that night," Jennifer said as the cameras began rolling. Sarah recounted the events, Feeling somewhat awkward about describing her own actions as heroic, she emphasized how it had been a pure instinct, and that anyone would have done the same thing. Rebecca and her children shared their perspective, with Rebecca becoming emotional as she described how grateful she was that Sarah had protected her babies. "What does it mean to you that Sarah risked her own safety for your children?" Jennifer asked Rebecca. "It means everything," Rebecca replied, her voice breaking slightly. "In a world where people often look the other way, Sarah proved that there are still people who will put others before themselves. My children could have been seriously hurt if not for her quick thinking and bravery." The interview also included Mike discussing how the incident had affected the restaurant staff and Robert Coleman speaking about Sarah's new position in the management training program. Robert explained how witnessing Sarah's character had convinced him that she would be an asset to their organization. "We promote people based on their potential and their values," Robert said to the camera. Sarah demonstrated both courage and selflessness in a split second. "Those are the qualities we look for in our future leaders." After the news crew finished filming, Sarah thought the story would air once and then be forgotten. She had no idea that the local news segment would be just the beginning of a much larger phenomenon. The story aired on the 6 o'clock news that Friday evening. Sarah watched it at Mrs. Thompson's apartment, feeling embarrassed seeing herself on television but proud of how well everyone had represented the incident. Within hours of the broadcast, something unexpected began happening. The news station's website received hundreds of comments from viewers who were moved by Sarah's story. People were sharing the video on social media platforms, and it began spreading far beyond the local viewing area. By Saturday morning, Sarah's phone was ringing constantly. News stations from other cities wanted to interview her. Social media influencers were requesting to share her story. Corporate executives from Kentucky Fried Chicken's national headquarters were calling to discuss expanding the story for their national marketing campaign. "Sarah," Robert called her Saturday afternoon, "I've been fielding calls all morning about your story. The video has been viewed over 50,000 times online and it's still spreading. This is turning into something much bigger than any of us anticipated." Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention. "I just want to focus on starting my new job and learning how to be a good manager. All this publicity feels strange to me." "I understand," Robert said sympathetically, "but I think you should know that this story is inspiring people all over the country. We're receiving emails from customers saying they want to visit our restaurants because of what you represent. Your actions are having a positive impact on thousands of people." That evening, Mrs. Thompson came over to Sarah's apartment with a stack of printed emails and social media posts. She had been following the online response to Sarah's story and wanted to share some of the messages with her. "Look at this one," Mrs. Thompson said, pointing to a Facebook comment. "A woman in Texas says your story inspired her to volunteer at a local shelter. And this man in Ohio says he's going to start carrying himself differently because your example reminded him to look out for others." As Sarah read through the messages, she began to understand that her split-second decision to protect those children had created ripples that were spreading much further than she had ever imagined. People weren't just inspired by her actions. They were being motivated to act more courageously and compassionately in their own lives. But the most incredible part of this story was still to come, and it would arrive in a way that none of them could have predicted. 2 weeks after the news story aired, Sarah's life had become a whirlwind of opportunities and unexpected developments. The video of her heroic act had been viewed over 2 million times across various social media platforms. She had received interview requests from national television shows, book publishers wanting to tell her story, and even a Hollywood agent interested in developing a movie based on her experience. Sarah was trying to balance all this attention with her new role in the management training program. She spent her days learning about restaurant operations, working alongside experienced managers, and developing the skills she would need to run her own location. Despite all the external noise, she remained focused on her original dream of building a career in the food service industry. On a Tuesday morning, Sarah received a phone call that would prove to be the most incredible part of her entire journey. The caller was Nancy Williams, the executive assistant to the CEO of Kentucky Fried Chicken's parent company. "Ms. Martinez," Nancy said, "Mr. David Harrison, our CEO, would like to personally meet with you. He's been following your story and believes it represents everything our company stands for." Sarah could hardly believe that the CEO of a major corporation wanted to meet with her. What would he want to discuss with me? I think it would be better if Mr. Harrison explained that himself, Nancy replied diplomatically. Would you be available to fly to our headquarters in Louisville this Friday? Sarah had never been on an airplane before, but she agreed to the meeting. The company arranged for her transportation and accommodations, treating her like a VIP guest rather than an entry-level employee. When Friday arrived, Sarah found herself in the elegant boardroom of one of America's largest restaurant chains. David Harrison was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a warm smile that immediately put Sarah at ease. Sarah, he said as he shook her hand, thank you for making the trip here. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I've never seen a story capture people's hearts the way yours has. Sitting around the conference table were several other executives, including the head of marketing, the director of human resources, and the vice president of operations. Sarah felt intimidated by the high-level meeting but tried to remain calm and professional. Your story has done something remarkable, David continued. It's reminded people that our brand isn't just about food. It's about community, caring for others, and doing the right thing even when no one is watching. The marketing director, a woman named Patricia Chen, opened a folder filled with data and reports. Since your story went viral, our company has seen a 15% increase in positive brand sentiment. Customer satisfaction scores have improved, and we're receiving applications from job candidates who specifically mention being inspired by your example. Sarah listened in amazement as the executives explained how her simple act of protecting 2 children had somehow influenced the entire company's reputation and performance. We have a proposition for you, David said, leaning forward. We'd like to create a new position within our organization, Director of Community Inspiration. Your role would be to travel to different restaurant locations, meet with employees and customers, and share your story to inspire others to embrace the values you demonstrated that night. Sarah was speechless. She had expected to spend the next 6 months learning basic management skills, and now they were offering her a director-level position. The position would come with a significant salary increase, Patricia added, along with travel benefits, a company car, and the opportunity to impact thousands of employees across our entire network. But I don't have any experience in corporate leadership, Sarah said hesitantly. I'm still learning the basics of restaurant management. David smiled warmly. Sarah, what you did that night can't be taught in any business school or training program. You showed authentic leadership under pressure. You put others before yourself without hesitation. Those are the qualities that inspire people to be their best selves. The Human Resources Director, Michael Rodriguez, explained more details about the position. Sarah would spend time at different restaurant locations, conducting employee meetings, participating in community events, and serving as a living example of the company's values. She would also work with the marketing team to develop campaigns promoting kindness and community service. We're not asking you to be a spokesperson reading scripted messages, Michael clarified. We want you to be yourself and share your genuine experiences. Your authenticity is what makes your story so powerful. Sarah asked for time to think about the offer, and the executives graciously agreed. They arranged for her to tour some of their restaurant locations in Louisville, so she could see firsthand how her story had already begun impacting employees and customers. At the first restaurant they visited, Sarah was surprised to see a framed photo of her bucket incident displayed prominently near the entrance. The restaurant manager, a woman named Carol, explained that her team had become motivated to provide better customer service after hearing Sarah's story. Your example reminded us that we're not just serving food, Carol said. We're serving people, and every interaction is an opportunity to make someone's day a little better. At another location, Sarah met a teenage employee named Marcus who had been struggling with his confidence and work performance. After seeing Sarah's story, he had started approaching his job with more pride and dedication. You showed me that it doesn't matter where you start, Marcus told Sarah. What matters is how you treat people and whether you're willing to do the right thing when it counts. As Sarah visited more locations and heard more stories about how her actions had inspired positive changes, she began to understand the true impact of what had happened that night. Her split-second decision to protect 2 children had created a ripple effect that was touching lives across the entire organization. On the flight back home, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a bucket hitting her from the colonel. She thought about Mrs. Thompson's wisdom about being in the right place at the right time, Rebecca's gratitude for protecting her children, and all the employees who had been inspired to approach their work with renewed purpose. When Sarah arrived back in her city, she called Mrs. Thompson to share the news about the job offer. The elderly woman listened with tears of joy as Sarah described the opportunities that lay ahead. "I told you that courage would open doors," Mrs. Thompson said softly. "But you've done something even more important than advancing your own career. You've reminded people that heroism doesn't require superpowers or special training. Sometimes it just requires caring enough about others to act when action is needed." Sarah accepted the Director of Community Inspiration position, and over the following months, she traveled to hundreds of restaurant locations, sharing her story and inspiring thousands of employees to embrace the values of courage, kindness, and putting others first. The bucket that had hit her that night had indeed changed everything, but not in the way anyone could have predicted. It had transformed Sarah from a struggling job seeker into a source of inspiration for an entire corporation. More importantly, it had shown that one moment of selfless action could create waves of positive change that extend far beyond what the eye can see. Years later, whenever Sarah told her story, she always ended with the same message. You never know when life will give you the opportunity to make a difference in someone else's world. The most important thing is to be ready to act when that moment comes, even if it means getting hit by a bucket from the Colonel.